Michael stepped into the house, dropping his duffel bag onto the creaking wooden floor. The Victorian-style home was old but sturdy, its high ceilings and intricate molding remnants of a past era. Dust hung in the air, catching the afternoon light that filtered through the tall, narrow windows. It smelled of aged wood, forgotten memories, and something faintly metallic. It was supposed to be a fresh start after the divorce. He needed space, solitude, and a project to keep his mind occupied. The house, with its charm and lingering mysteries, seemed perfect. He walked through the hallway, his fingers trailing along the faded wallpaper. The floorboards groaned under his weight as he explored each room. The spacious living area, the grand staircase leading upstairs, the kitchen with its outdated appliances. But something unsettled him. The layout didn't feel right. Pausing into the corridor, Michael noticed a door. It was plain, almost too unremarkable compared to the rest of the house, with a dull brass handle that seemed untouched by time. He reached for it, then hesitated. A strange chill crawled up his arm. A sudden knock at the front door startled him. He turned instinctively, his heart skipping. When he looked back, the door was gone. His fingers brushed the wall where it had been, but there was nothing, just smooth, unbroken plaster. He blinked, stepping back, his pulse quickening. Had he imagined it? The house was old. Maybe the dim light played tricks on his mind. Shaking his head, he walked toward the front of the house. It was just his imagination, right? Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That door, he had seen it. He was sure of it. Yet, when he searched the hallway again, running his hands along the wall, there was no trace of it. No seams, no hinges, nothing. That night, as he lay in bed, he stared at the ceiling, his mind looping over the image of the door. Maybe it had been a trick of the light. Or maybe the house wasn't as structurally sound as he thought. The next morning, he pulled out the blueprints. The previous owner had left behind old documents and renovation plans, all neatly packed in the study. Michael spread them across the table, running his eyes over the floor plan. Living room, kitchen, bathroom, all accounted for. No extra doors. He frowned. The hallway had been long, but something about the proportions felt wrong. He grabbed a measuring tape and walked back to the corridor. Slowly, he measured the length from the entrance to the far wall. Then he checked the blueprints again. The hallway was 2 feet shorter than it should have been. His stomach twisted. There was space missing. A loud creak echoed behind him. Michael spun around. The hallway was empty. His heart pounded, a cold sweat breaking out on his back. He let out a breath, forcing a laugh. Jesus, Michael, you're acting like a damn horror movie protagonist. Still, as he walked away, he couldn't help but glance over his shoulder. That night, he dreamed of a door standing in the dark, waiting for him to open it. The dream lingered with him the next morning. A door, standing alone in the darkness, silent, waiting. Michael shook it off and tried to focus on unpacking, but his mind kept drifting back to the hallway. The missing space behind the wall gnawed at him. He needed to let it go. He had more important things to do than chase after architectural inconsistencies. Then, that night, something changed. He had just turned off the lights when he heard it, a soft, rhythmic knocking. Michael sat up, heart thudding. The sound was distant, but distinct. 3 knocks, slow and deliberate. He held his breath, straining his ears. Knock, knock, knock. Swinging his legs over the bed, he stepped cautiously into the hallway. The house was quiet, the air thick with something unsettling. He followed the sound, every step making his skin crawl. And then he saw it. At the end of the hallway, where there had been only wall, now stood the door. The same plain wooden door with its dull brass handle. Michael's breath hitched. It shouldn't be there, but it was. He swallowed hard, stepping closer. He reached out, fingers trembling, and wrapped his hand around the handle. It was ice cold. Suddenly, a gust of air rushed through the corridor, slamming the bedroom doors behind him. He gasped and stumbled back, the hallway plunging into an unnatural silence. Michael turned on every light in the house. When he dared to look again, the door was gone. Michael barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, He saw the door, standing at the end of the hallway, waiting. By morning, exhaustion pressed against his skull like a vice. But he needed answers. The house was old. Maybe there was a logical explanation, some sealed-off section, a forgotten renovation, or something hidden in its history. That afternoon, he drove into town, heading straight for the local archives. The librarian, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, seemed surprised we mentioned the address. "That house?" she said, lowering her voice. "You're living there?" Michael hesitated. "Yeah. Why?" She gave him a long, measured look before disappearing behind a row of filing cabinets. When she returned, she carried a faded newspaper article. The headline made his blood run cold. "Local man found dead in home, facing a wall where a door should have been." Michael's fingers tightened around the paper. The article was dated nearly 30 years ago. A man named Thomas Redding had lived in the house, reported missing for weeks before being found, his body stiff, his face frozen in an expression of sheer terror. The autopsy found no injuries, no cause of death. Only one thing stood out. He had been found sitting in front of a blank wall, his hands resting on the floor, right where a door would have been. Michael's stomach churned. This was impossible. The story was old, but the details matched exactly what he had seen. When he got home that night, the hallway felt different. Heavy, charged with something unseen. And then, just as he turned toward his bedroom, the door was back. This time it was open. Michael stood frozen at the end of the hallway, his breath shallow. The door in front of him was ajar, its brass handle gleaming faintly in the harsh light of the hallway. He hadn't heard it open, hadn't seen it appear. One moment it was gone, and now it was there, waiting as though it had always been. His heart raced. He should walk away, call someone, maybe even leave the house. But curiosity, or perhaps something darker, anchored him to the spot. He took a cautious step forward, his pulse quickening as he approached the door. It wasn't just the door itself that disturbed him. It was the air around it, cold, thick, and almost unnatural. He could feel it pressing against his skin, the hairs on his arms standing on end as he reached out. The door, like before, was icy to the touch, but this time there was no hesitation. He twisted the handle and stepped inside. Beyond the door, everything seemed wrong. The walls of the hallway stretched on farther than they should have. The floor beneath his feet was uneven, and the air smelled stale, as though it hadn't been disturbed in years. He blinked, adjusting his eyes to the dim light. The house felt familiar, but slightly off, like a bad dream. The furniture in the living room was in the wrong place. The chairs turned in odd directions. The walls were cracked, peeling in some places, as if the house itself were decaying from within. He could almost hear the house breathing, the creaks and groans vibrating through the floorboards. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing strangely in the silence. Nothing. A shadow shifted at the edge of his vision. Michael spun around, but there was no one there. He stepped forward, unease building in his chest, until he realized there was no way out. The hallway, the rooms, it was all the same. And the door behind him? Gone. The silence of the house pressing on Michael, suffocating, as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. The rooms looked like they were his, but the feeling of wrongness was undeniable. He could no longer hear the outside world. No birds chirping, no wind rattling the windows. The house felt sealed off, like it existed in its own isolated space. Every step he took, the floorboards creaked beneath him. But there was no echo. The sound was absorbed by the thick air, as if the house itself were alive, breathing alongside him. The walls seemed to stretch endlessly in places, as if they were shifting, growing longer or narrower as he moved. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. He tried to focus, but the room felt dizzying. He ran his fingers along the walls, the texture of the peeling wallpaper unsettlingly cold. "Hello?" he called again, his voice small against the oppressive silence. No answer. He turned into the living room, where an old couch faced the fireplace. But the arrangement was wrong. Everything was in the wrong place. A table was overturned. A picture frame was missing, its glass shattered. It was as though someone had been living in this house, but then abruptly left, leaving everything in a state of disarray. The shadows grew longer, stretching and twisting in the corners of the room, as if they had a life of their own. He froze, eyes darting around the room. There was something moving, just a flicker at the edge of his vision. A shadow darted past the doorway, disappearing down the hallway. It moved with purpose, like it was leading him somewhere, or perhaps chasing him. Against his better judgment, Michael followed. The house seemed to close in around him, the walls narrowing as he took each step, and the air growing heavier with every breath. There was no turning back now. Michael's footsteps were slow and deliberate as he followed the shadow down the hallway, his breath tight in his chest. Every corner he turned seemed to grow darker, as if the house was deliberately drawing him deeper into its twisted interior. The shadows stretched further, and with each passing second, the temperature dropped, a chill gnawing at his skin like icy fingers. He paused, his eyes catching the faint glow of a small light. It came from a room at the end of the hall. Michael's stomach tightened. The light was soft and almost inviting, but it felt wrong, like a beacon pulling him into something sinister. With no other choice, he walked toward the light, his feet dragging, the sound of his footsteps too loud in the oppressive quiet. As he approached the door, a strange pull seemed to draw him closer, a force he couldn't explain. He hesitated for a moment, his hand shaking as he reached for the handle. The room beyond was small, cramped, and suffocating. The air was thick with dust and mildew. Old furniture was strewn across the floor, and the walls were covered in faded photographs, black and white images of people he didn't recognize, their faces staring back at him with hollow, empty eyes. But there was something familiar about the way they looked, something Michael couldn't quite place. He walked into the center of the room, feeling a sudden urge to touch one of the photographs. As his fingers brushed the glass, a cold rush of air whipped around him. He stumbled back, eyes scanning the room in a panic. That's when he saw it, a newspaper clipping on the floor, partially obscured by the dust. Michael picked it up, his heart racing as he read the headline. Local man found dead in home, facing a wall where a door should have been. The same article, the same chilling story. But now, something was different. The newspaper was about him. The words on the newspaper burned in Michael's mind, the reality of them sinking in like cold, sharp nails. He looked down at the article, his hands trembling. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't be about him. But the more he stared, the more the images blurred, as if his very mind was resisting the truth. The name in the headline was his, Michael Jacobs. His pulse spiked, his vision narrowing. He stumbled backward, his feet hitting something hard on the floor. He glanced down and saw a photograph, one that was too familiar. It was of him, standing in front of the house, smiling like everything was normal. But in the photograph, there was something off. The angle was wrong, the lighting too sharp, the shadows too deep. It felt like a photo that had been taken long before he arrived. He backed away from the photo, his breathing growing heavier. It couldn't be real. How could he have been in that photo before? A strange, quiet whisper filled the room. At first, it was a murmur, but then it grew clearer, as if it was right next to him, breathing into his ear. You've always been here. Michael's chest tightened. His mind reeled. The house had been empty for years before he moved in, or so he had been told. So why did it feel as though the house was alive, watching him, waiting for him? He stood up shakily, his head spinning, and turned to leave the room. But as he stepped into the hallway, he felt a presence behind him, a shadow at the edge of his vision. He turned quickly, but there was nothing. Yet he knew he wasn't alone in this house. And the door, the one that had appeared and vanished, was waiting for him. It was back. The air in the hallway felt heavier now, the walls pressing inward as if the house itself was closing in. Michael's heartbeat pounded in his ears, each thud louder than the last. His mind raced. He had to escape, but the door was gone again, as it always was. No matter how hard he tried to rationalize it, there was no denying the truth. This house, with its warped layout and shifting dimensions, wasn't just haunted. It was a trap. His eyes darted back down the hallway toward the far end, where the door had reappeared once more. It was open again, but this time, Michael could feel a sense of finality hanging in the air. There was no turning back. Whatever this house was, whatever force resided within it, had drawn him in, and now he was part of it. Michael stepped forward, his legs shaky, but his resolve hardening with every passing second. He had no idea what he would find beyond that door. Was it a way out? Or was it a place he'd be trapped forever, like Thomas Redding, the man whose body had been found decades ago, sitting in front of the same door, staring at it until he met his death? As he reached the threshold, the air grew cold, freezing his breath in his throat. He stood still for a moment, staring into the darkness beyond. A faint whisper echoed from within, this time clear as day. It's time. His heart clenched, but he couldn't turn away. He had to know the truth, even if it meant losing himself in the process. He stepped across the threshold, the door closing behind him with a finality that made his stomach lurch. The door slammed shut behind Michael with an almost deafening sound, and the world around him went still. Absolute silence. He could feel the cold seeping into his bones as his eyes adjusted to the dim, flickering light that illuminated the room. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of something he couldn't name, something old and ancient pressing down on him from all sides. The room he stood in was like nothing he had seen before. It was a dark reflection of the house he thought he knew. The walls were warped, twisted, as if they were made of shadows and whispers. The furniture, though familiar, was distorted, its shapes unnatural, like distorted reflections in a mirror. Michael's breath caught in his throat. He was still in the house, but it wasn't the house anymore. It felt like he had crossed into another realm, another version of reality altogether. He glanced around in panic, the overwhelming sense that he was being watched suffocating him. Suddenly, a low hum began to vibrate through the air, growing louder and more intense. It seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, reverberating deep within his chest. As he stepped forward, he realized the hum wasn't just a sound. It was alive, pulsing with something dark and ancient. A shape appeared in the center of the room, forming out of the shadows, a tall figure, its features hidden in the darkness. Michael's heart skipped a beat, but he couldn't move. The figure didn't speak, but its presence filled the room, overwhelming him with a sense of inevitability. Then, in a voice that sounded like 1,000 whispers, the figure spoke. Welcome home. The realization hit Michael like a ton of bricks. He hadn't just opened the door. He had walked into a trap, and now there was no escape. The echoes of his own breath, the whispering shadows, and the eternal hum filled the room, leaving Michael with one horrible truth. The house had never let him go.